Hello and welcome to Quickflicks, and today we'll be talking about the long-awaited Zack Snyder's Justice League. This has been a film that has been in the making for a long time. Personally, I was not part of the whole Snyder Cut fandom. I wasn't part of that whole thing. I always viewed this cut of the film to be kind of a Schrodinger's film sort of thing, where it both exists and it doesn't exist. And it wasn't until the fans and even some of the cast and crew jumped on board the whole bandwagon of releasing the Snyder Cut that WB and AT&T basically caved in and made this film, or allowed Zack Snyder to make this film. And make no mistake, I will say this, they didn't do this partly out of the obligation to rectify a wrong that had happened with Justice League. It is partially because they are motivated to bump up subscriber numbers for HBO Max. That's part of the whole thing with this whole thing, is that I view this as a really cool win for Zack Snyder. The fact that he was able to come back and finish a film that he had been forced out of, both by the studio and by unforeseen circumstances of his daughter's passing. That was very tragic when I first heard about it. And now he's back. He finished the film and he dedicated to his daughter, his late daughter. And so now we get to talk about it. So in an effort to prepare myself for this review, I rewatched Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, The Ultimate Cut, and Joss Whedon's Justice League, just to see what the differences between the two cuts are. And oh man, this film is long. They pretty much added an extra 2 hours of content in this whole movie, and it's a lot to go through. I will say, this film did surprise me in a lot of ways, because I thought it was going to be very pretentious. I thought BVS was pretentious, I thought Man of Steel was a bit pretentious, but here, there were times where it could seem to be pretentious, but in all honesty, it's more focused on just telling the story, as opposed to getting down to the themes and whatnot of what's being presented in the film. With that, it's just kind of more entertaining in that aspect. It's definitely not as cringe as I thought it was going to be, too. Now, in terms of the general story of this new version of Justice League, it kind of plays out mostly the same way as Joss Whedon's version, with Steppenwolf coming to Earth to try to find the three mother boxes. That's still the same. The League coming together, that's still the same, and all this other stuff. Steppenwolf is a pretty big change up from Joss Whedon's version. He's not as boring as the one in Joss Whedon's cut, and in this one, he's a lot more spiky. His suit is just all this, like, metal stuff that just kind of flows around. It's kind of weird, honestly. It works like an Iron Man suit for the most part. But they do give him a little bit more to work off of. He does have a relationship with Darkseid in this, and they add a little bit of motive for Steppenwolf. While I don't think Steppenwolf is a great villain, he's still kind of, a marauder of sorts. He still, hits people with axes and commands all the parademons and all that stuff. He is definitely a little bit more compelling than what we got in Joss Whedon's version. But the biggest additions to this movie are by far the scenes with The Flash and Cyborg. Both of these characters get huge additions in backstories, and it's just amazing. Cyborg gets more to deal with in terms of his relationship to his father, in terms of his progression from starting out as just a simple cyborg to understanding all the things that he can do with the power that he was given by, this mother box and whatnot. And honestly, there's even sections of this with his dad that I felt was a little bit emotional at times. And it just adds more to his character. And the fact that Joss Whedon cut all this backstory out for him is very upsetting to me. Just a little bit upsetting. And then with the Flash situation, they added a few more extra scenes of the Flash, but there's a huge moment in the third act climax of this film that is honestly a really cool visual spectacle. I thought it was really cool. I'm not going to spoil it because I know you guys are probably watching it right now, so there's a really cool action set piece with the Flash. That's all I'll say. But for the most part, it's mostly the same thing. It's split up into different chapters. Chapters 1 through 6 comprise the main story. There's an epilogue, and then you have credits. And to be honest, it's pretty good. But I will say, even though I am a fan of the fact that they gave Zack Snyder complete control, it also led to some of the film's problems that I had, particularly with the pacing of the film. See, the first 2.5 chapters, I should say, is a lot of build-up. That's about almost like an hour and 45 minutes of setup. That's a huge Act 1. Like, that's a lot of information. Not only are we reestablishing the world that we had from Batman vs. Superman, but it also goes over how the world's in mourning, and even the day-to-day lives of all the different people that we have in the League, and what they're trying to do, and all this other stuff. And it isn't until like halfway through Chapter 3 and into Chapter 4 that we get more people, like, you know, getting together and trying to work through this problem with the parademons and the mother boxes and whatnot. But after that point, it picks up considerably, because the first 2 hours of this just slogs. It's basically a first act introduction. It's a lot to work with. And if you can get past that first 2 hours, I feel like the rest of it just kind of picks up after that point. I also felt like the epilogue was a bit much. It's like 30 minutes. Or not 30 minutes, it's like 45 minutes of nothing but conclusions. It's basically the ending of Return of the King. And there was like a point in the film where I was like, oh, okay, so this is where it's going to end. Kind of like how the original Justice League kind of ends. With, like, you know, Clark Kent just opening up his shirt, going into the alley, and changing into his super suit. Well, turns out that's not what's happening here. Because it goes on for an extra, like, 20 minutes. Just full of, like, teasers of things that could happen in the future. And then they have, like, you know, another character show up to set up another thing. And, I mean, at least it's a faithful sort of, like, this is what would have happened if I had the full creative capability back in 2017. But now that, like, Warner Brothers has kind of scrapped the idea of doing a Justice League 2 and a Justice League 3 with Zack Snyder, and even he himself has said at various lengths that they're not looking to work with him again on another project, it just seems to me that this extra epilogue is just kind of wishful thinking, this extra part is just wishful thinking. And it's also bittersweet, because to the fans of Zack Snyder, you know, it could have been like a possible tease for something in the future. And unfortunately, knowing what we know now, Warner Brothers is kind of unlikely to actually work with Zack Snyder again after this point. Now I say might, because AT&T is still the driving force for Warner Brothers. And if they wanted to, they could basically say, hey, give Zack Snyder all the money, give him all the things he needs. He's going to finish this trilogy because we have to keep up the HBO Max subscriptions. That's what I feel what could happen in the future with this franchise. But as it is right now, you know, I don't think it's going to happen. It might happen, but again, it's just the same way as I felt about the Snyder Cut before it was announced. It's a Schrodinger's film. It's a thing that probably doesn't exist, and it's a thing that probably doesn't exist. You know, it's a thing that doesn't and does exist, if that makes sense. In terms of other gripes I have with the film, I think there's still that one. In terms of other gripes I have with the film, I think the music at times can be a little bit overpowering. I know he's trying to go for like this like huge epic story and whatnot, but I think, to be honest with you, the whole throat singing thing, like proceeding to the Wonder Woman theme, is also a little bit too much, just a little bit too much. That's just me, right? I think that's just a nitpick on my end, but I know some people that like Junkie XL's score. I'm just not a fan of it. I'm just not a fan of that. In terms of the other positives I have with the film, aside from the Flash and Cyborg, I felt the general teamwork of the team in the final battle actually works to its benefit. It definitely didn't really feel as one-sided as I felt with Joss Whedon's Justice League. There is definitely a sense of like, hey, this person's going to do this, and then, there's a lot of connective tissues to get this one thing to happen, and I feel like that works really well in its benefit. There are moments when characters actually kind of relate to each other. Flash and Aquaman have various scenes where they actually kind of connect with each other or just banter a little bit. Like, I felt that was pretty cool. And the resurrection of Superman didn't really feel as tacked on as the original Joss Whedon cut of the film. This time around, it just kind of naturally gets to that place. And it is definitely a little bit different from the comics in terms of the return to Superman after the death of Superman storyline and all that stuff. On the whole, Zack Snyder's Justice League ended up being a pretty entertaining film for the most part. Don't get me wrong, it's 4 hours long, and if you're willing to sit through the first 2 hours of setup, the last half of the film is definitely going to be up your alley. There's just so much that has to be set up, and I know some people don't have the attention span for that. There's not a lot of action in those first 2 hours, but after that point, it gets a whole lot better. There's definitely things that you'll be like, oh, this is deja vu. I saw that in the 2017 cut. And so, so much of this movie is director-driven. And I'm glad that WB and AT&T gave in and pretty much allowed Zack Snyder to finish what he started. Even if his future plans are scrapped, I'm glad that they were able to do this one thing for a director that lost so much, and I'm glad for that. And even though I don't like Man of Steel or BVS, I ended up really enjoying Zack Snyder's Justice League. It's definitely not like my top tier like superhero films of all time, but it is better than Man of Steel and BVS in a lot of ways. So I'll give credit where credit is due right there. I'm going to give Zack Snyder's Justice League a B-. Thank you guys so much for watching my review of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Go check it out on HBO Max right now if you want to form your own opinion. And that's all for today. And I got to get ready because next week is my birthday. And I got to play with some toys. I'll see you guys in the next review. Peace.